utilitarianism, the general principles are as follows. Basically, the greatest good for the greatest number is like the biggest strapline of the whole thing. It's like the fundamental thing you have to know about utilitarianism. And by this he means avoidance of pain and pursuit of pleasure. This kind of fits naturally with the hedonism, which is Greek, which means that we as humans strive for pleasure and avoid pain at all costs. The word util literally means useful, which kind of makes a lot of sense with this utilitarianism. Anyway, it's consequential or teleological, so it's based on the consequences rather than deontological, which is like based on the intention or the motive kind of thing. Yeah. So, Jeremy Bentham basically invented it, and he says that we are motivated by pain and pleasure. Quite a good quote to put in essays now is like, nature has placed mankind under the governance of two sovereign masters, pain and pleasure. It is for them alone to point out what we ought to do. So basically, we are guided by pain and pleasure. It's just like a natural thing for us. He also banged on about the principle of utility. The rightness of an action is determined by its usefulness or utility. Makes sense being called utilitarianism, doesn't it? Okay, he also had this pretty cool thing called the hedonic calculus, which is basically 7 little bits that you can judge. You can try and find out what the right thing to do is by following them. So here goes. He has intensity, which is how intense the pain is or the pleasure is, and that will make a difference to whether you should choose to do that or not. He has duration, which is how long it's going to last for. So that's it, really. Certainty. How certain is it? Certain is it that the pain or pleasure will actually happen? Remoteness, so how far in the future is the pain or pleasure, which might be quite important to think about. Richness, will it lead to further pleasure? Further pleasure. Purity, how free from pain is it? And extent, how wide are its effects, so who does it affect? That kind of thing. Okay, so basically, this guy called John Stuart Mill comes along. He's like, I like utilitarianism, but some parts are a bit iffy. So he's like, okay, some people think that pleasures aren't the same. So he comes up with these higher and lower pleasures, which basically means that some are qualitatively better than others. So for example, having sex because you're in love is better, like a higher pleasure, than having sex because you're a bit slutty. There's a nice wee quote to go here, which says, "It is better to be a human dissatisfied than a pig satisfied. Better to be Socrates dissatisfied than a fool satisfied." So basically, humans have higher intelligence than animals or whatever, and so we should always strive for the higher pleasures because we have that like advantage kind of thing. He also came up with this idea of competent judges. So basically, those people who have experienced both the higher and lower pleasure are the only ones who have the authority to judge. And finally, the harm principle is another aspect of Mill's utilitarianism. It means that it limits the majority from bullying the minority, which is what happens sometimes in utilitarianism. Pardon me. Oh, and again. Another wee quote to go here if you'd like to jot it down. The only purpose for which power can be rightfully exercised over any member of a civilised community against his will is to prevent harm to others. So basically what he means there is you can't hurt someone just because you think it's the greatest pleasure. I mean, the greatest good for the greatest number type thing, so it kind of helps out there. Okay. Act and rule utilitarianism. So, act utilitarianism is sort of Bentham's version. It's focused solely on the action, and it basically means that as long as the outcome is loving, you can do whatever you like, really. You can break the law, even, if it's to bring about greater pleasure. Whereas in rule utilitarianism, which is Mill's adaptation, you have to follow rules that are usually in place to bring about the most pleasure. So, for example, Mill would always say that you should drive on the left-hand side of the road if you're in the UK, because it's usually that you usually get the most pleasure from that. Even if a car comes screaming towards you, you shouldn't move out the way, because you're doing what is mostly gains the most pleasure, you know? When applying to an ethical issue, we're looking at allocation of resources in the NHS, which is quite a relevant topic, seeing as they've got cuts and all that. So, for example, if you had a hip replacement, 10 hip replacements, or 1 heart operation, you would work through the hedonic calculus to work out who deserves it the most. So if you're looking at extent, for example, you'd realise that there are 10 individuals and families with the hip replacement option. Can't even say that today. Whereas there's only 1 family and the individual in the heart transplant operation type thing. So yeah, that was good. Duration, for example, the hip replacement people are likely to be quite old, and so really how much time could they gain after that? They've only got a few years left. You might as well give it to the heart guy who's got, like, I don't know, if he's young and he's been smoking, and he's got the whole of the rest of his life ahead of him. You can't deny that. You've got to take these things into consideration. That's, I guess, what Bentham was trying to get at. Let's have a look here. Intensity, you could use that. You could say that really how much pain relief will they get, both, like how much does the hip replacement, how good is that intense pleasure from that, or this guy who's gonna have his whole life change, he can do all this stuff he's never been able to do. So you gotta think about it, really. It's like considering all the different aspects, I guess, is what the hedonic calculus is supposed to do. Naturally, there's strengths and weaknesses of both people, so I'm going to go through them now. Strengths of Bentham, right. So basically, you and me, it's natural to strive for pleasure and avoid pain, isn't it? Isn't that what we do normally? So it's quite easy to apply that to a theory type thing, you know what I mean? And also, when you're making decisions, you're kind of thinking, I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm thinking about the consequences all the time. I'm like, well, if I do that, then this will happen. If I do that, well, this will happen. I don't know what to do. So it's kind of looking at the consequences. It seems quite logical and quite sensical because we do it anyway. See what I'm getting at? Yeah? Cool. It's balanced, it's democratic, everybody gets their say, you know, these general plus sides. It's practical to use. You don't need any wisdom. It's like you just work through it like it's a quiz type thing, you know. Nobody needs particular brain cells, really. It's particularly applicable to large scale organisations like the NHS or hospitals, which is sort of the NHS anyway. Yeah, it's objective, so there's no hoo-ha about what's what and stuff. Just ignore that. I don't know what just happened. Weaknesses though, however, Bentham, weaknesses. AQA Utilitarianism, told you what that was before, theoretically can justify almost any action as long as you say that it was to produce the most pleasure. So, technically, instances like the sadistic guards, you know, they might be thinking that it's for the greater pleasure to you know, torture that little kid or whatever, but obviously from his point of view he won't be saying it that way. So, you know, you've got to think about it. You know, utilitarianism could potentially allow this kind of thing, which is not good. Some might say it's impractical. Are you really gonna sit there and like work your way through this massive list of all these things you can and can't do, you know? Like, are you gonna consider how long it's gonna last? Are you gonna consider who it's gonna affect? Probably, but you catch my drift, right? Greatest good for the greatest number can potentially support things like the Holocaust, which is obviously awful, so that's not good. Also, are all people of equal worth? Can we really say that a serial killer is the same status as a baby or an innocent woman who's done nothing but good all her life? Can we put them in the same category? No. And also, being humans, we suck sometimes, so how are we supposed to predict the consequences accurately? How do we know it's going to end up like that? We don't know. Consequences are unpredictable. We don't know what's going on. We don't, you know, we can't predict them, you know. Yeah, that's another one. You can't. It kind of doesn't take people into consideration. If you see a big burning house with your dad and this guy who is about to break through on this discovery on science and he's going to save the world, blah blah blah, I mean, you're never going to be in that situation, but if you were, theoretically, you would save your dad, you know, and that's not going through, you know, the greatest good to the greatest number, all that stuff, you know. You've got to take it into account. So, this guy Mill, let's see his strengths. I've got down here that higher and lower pleasures are quite good because they make the distinction between different types of pleasure and different types of pain, which some people thought was a good idea because they didn't like the fact that Bentham classed them all as the same. So, decisions are better informed, and yeah, that's it, really. Oh, also, of course, the harm principle, which I might not have mentioned, which basically means don't harm anybody, protects the minority. So with the sadistic guards, like example, the minority would be protected by those higher and lower pleasures because the guards would not be getting higher pleasures from doing what they were doing, you know. Let's have a wee look at weaknesses. This is it. You're gonna have to look him up because I don't know how to say his name. Called Mill a blockhead for saying that everybody was the same because apparently they're not, which, you know, debatable. They could not be, might not all be equal. Also, defining higher and lower pleasures, you know, surely it's all to do with intention, really, because if you're having sex or you're making love, you know, the only difference there is the intention. The action is still the same. That's a one to think about. Also, real utilitarianism might actually, for example, make someone tell the truth when actually it would be better to lie. It's cold. Oh, sorry. So if some maniac, again, a completely random example you're probably never going to encounter, but a maniac comes running into your house, into your shop that you own, and he's like, tell me where the guy is that was running here. And instead of going, oh, he's just over there, he's just over there, go and kill him, which is what real utilitarianism would make you do, you should probably go like, I don't know where he is, I'm really sorry, he didn't even run in here, type thing. So yeah, real utilitarianism might make you tell the truth because, you're following a rule which usually brings about pleasure. So, that could be horrific. Yeah, that's it, right? That's the basics covered, but there are more questions, like more kind of debating questions that I've got to answer for my subject, so I'm going to go through them, but if you should probably stop watching if you're not interested in that. But basically, next question, what is better? Ending of pain and suffering versus increase in pleasure, which is better? I had to come up with these myself, so I don't know if they're much good, but this is my ideas. So, if you were going to say the ending of pain and suffering is better, you could say that it is better to live a normal life, free from pain and suffering, than having both pain but also pleasure. So it's better to have a balanced life with no extra pleasure but no extra pain and suffering, because then it's no suffering, which is fine. Also, this is quite an interesting point. If you were to apply the greatest good for the greatest number in society, if those less fortunate had their pain and suffering eradicated, and those who are really, really rich had their wealth and richness taken away from them, then maybe society would be more balanced, more fairness, more justice in the world, like that song that I'm not going to sing. On the other hand, you might prefer to have an increase in pleasure instead and keep your pain and suffering too. This would mean that people are living the best version of their life possible. So the increase in pleasure might actually override and exceed the fact that they still have pain and suffering, It might be so rich that they forget all about it, they just get on with their lives. Having both pain and pleasure, so excessive amounts of both, means that it's easier to appreciate pleasure when you do experience it. So if you've got a lot more intense pleasure somehow, but you also have this pain and suffering, you kind of can see the contrast more. Having more pleasure in your life could encourage empathy in someone who is less fortunate. So it's like, which is, I don't know about you, but I quite like the fact, I think empathy is a really important thing. It's a positive character trait. So yeah, that's my ideas. How worthwhile is the start again. How worthwhile is the pursuit for happiness, and is it all people desire? Well, some might say that the pursuit of happiness is not worthwhile because it's not the only thing that we should strive for. There are so many other things that we should work towards and encompass in our goals, like advancing in your career to feel a sense of achievement and satisfaction, blah blah blah. That guy, the ethics guy called Kant, he might say that with regards to natural law, it's our duty to perform the 5 primary precepts, and that is all. So like to live and to work and stuff like that, and whatever it is. Happiness is not mentioned at all anywhere here. It's not important, according to Kant, he does not give a fluff about happiness. Right. Thing is, if we were all to strive for happiness, the British majority would have the upper hand over the minority. So like the sadistic guards, again, I know I keep going back to it, but it's like we would all be, it's kind of selfish, we were like, I want the happiness, no, I want the happiness type thing, So it might not be so good. Oh yes. For Christians, however, it's happiness on earth is kind of irrelevant, seeing as all they want to do is get to heaven, so why would they bother about pursuing happiness in this life? It's kind of pointless for them. This is quite a complex point, so I'll try and explain it as best as possible, fingers crossed. Even if the individual thinks they are doing what will make them most happy, it might not actually be in their best interest. And this links in with preference utilitarianism, which is basically what you should do, what you prefer, and what's in your best interests. So for example, I'm going to read it out now. A pregnant young mum may think she's gaining the most happiness from keeping the baby, but it's not in either of their best interests because it will have a negative effect on her life, e.g. can't go back to work, gets into debt, health problems, etc. But on the other hand, however, some people might say it's worthwhile. So like, pursuing happiness generally conforms all good things in life, could be argued. So some strive for money, some for love, they're all doing things that make them happy, So most good things stem from happiness is what I'm trying to say. So also, Mr. Bentham over there might say that, or up there I should say, might say that because it's natural to strive towards happiness, so pleasure and pain, because that's all he's obsessed with, it's almost easy to, so it's kind of like, because it's natural, it's easy, and so it's worthwhile because you're not really doing much but you're getting quite a lot back, is what he would say, maybe. That last part of that question though, is it all people desire? Is it all people desire? No. I can't answer, so I don't know. Sadly, it's getting to the end of our video, but I'm going to leave you with one last question. How compatible, or at least I'll try, how compatible is utilitarianism with religion? Well, I'll tell you. Let's start with compatible, because there aren't very many. So, even though Mill was an atheist, he did say that utilitarian teachings are similar to kind of Jesus's compassion teachings. So when he gave the Sermon on the Mount, that's Mount by the way, his main kind of idea was love thy neighbour, which kind of links in with teachings about social justice, kind of like with utilitarianism, greatest good for the greatest number. It's kind of all the same thing really. Secondly, the golden rule, do unto others as you would have others unto do to you. You know that quote. You know that quote. It's kind of similar to the principle of utility. I don't know, it's quite like, it's almost the same thing again, in religion, thirdly, in religion and utilitarianism, they're kind of like both striving after the good things, because that's a similarity, I guess. Real utilitarianism can be quite closely related to the Ten Commandments. You can use all the commandments for the rules in real utilitarianism. However, incompatibility is also important. So the majority of utilitarians, e.g. Mill, are atheists. So it kind of suggests that the two don't mix. If the, you know, you can't have all these atheists like, oh yeah, it's to do with God. You know what I mean? It's quite hard to just reduce religion down to just the pursuit of pleasure, because that's basically not what it's all about. That's another incompatibility aspect. Religion is all about putting yourself last, you know, being selfless and all this unconditional love and stuff, whereas utilitarianism is sometimes a bit selfish, kind of a bit like, me, I'm the most important thing around here. Yep. Fourthly, religion might say that pain is actually important. It's quite good for us. Like, it doesn't. Why should we steer away from it? Because it kind of is teaching us empathy, preparing us for like worse pains in the world if we come across them, or even like tests before heaven to see if we can actually do it, type thing. Let me have a look down here. Let's stick to. Oh right, okay, yeah. So, AQA utilitarianism might conflict with ideas like natural law, because they're hard, fast rules that cannot be messed around with, really. So, yeah, like natural law, and ooh, I'm popular. And the sanctity of life, you know, that they contradict the idea of being in a situation, and like, because they're absolute rules, they cannot be broken at any point whatsoever. Yeah, religion focuses on the ultimate end, so in heaven, rather than the life that we have now, and so any happiness of suffering sort of becomes irrelevant. So in that sense, they're not really compatible, because they're not focusing on the same thing. If you catch my drift. I hope you enjoyed that wee video. This accent's getting harder and harder to do, but I hope you liked it, and I hoped it was helpful in your A levels, and I hope you do brilliantly. Ta-ta.